All right, we have returned to open session. So at this time, is there any public comment? So we have 3 speakers who have signed in. The first one is Alistair Graham.
Alistair. Quiet room. I only regretted that I can't be further away and talk. So, okay. So, Dr. Ryan Toy, members of the board, thanks for letting me speak. My name is Alistair Graham, and I have 3 kids at Ames. They're all different grades. I'll spare you guys tonight, and I won't reiterate the points that I made in my email to you a couple of weeks ago after that last board meeting. But please note for the record that I'm still very much in favor of opening up the schools for more in-person education this school year. Instead, I'd like to highlight what, in my view, is the main reason for the strong community support for increasing in-person learning for grades K through 5. That is ensuring a quality educational experience. With 3 children in the K through 5 hybrid program, it has become very apparent that the asynchronous portion of the hybrid experience varies greatly from classroom to classroom. Some teachers are trying really hard. Each day they set out detailed schedules with vigorous assignments for the students during their asynchronous time, keeping the students engaged, learning, and in school during that time. I appreciate the efforts of those teachers and can tell that they're bending over backwards to try to make it work. But you guys know that parents, we talk, we compare. In other classes, there's a far different experience. They're not as engaged or learning as much as they could be during this asynchronous portion. And this disparity is what drives my support for increasing the in-person time at the K through 5 level. For the classrooms with the less engaged, less true learning hybrid experience, the in-person time, which is 2 hours max when you net mask breaks and arrival and dismissal procedures. So that's the only real educational time those kids have. So we have kids in the hybrid program who should be in school and being taught full days, 5 days a week. But in reality, their asynchronous time is all over the board, and they end up getting only about 2 hours of true instruction a day. If, due to the way that our hybrid program was structured back in the summer, returning students for more in-person time is truly not a possibility for the remainder of the school year, then we need to find a way to enrich the hybrid program at-home learning experience for all classes. Clearly, I'm not a subject matter expert on how to teach a class, but could there be more use of zooming into classroom teaching or small group work, even if it's through Zoom? We've repeatedly heard about the commitment made to the teachers and families to keep 6 feet of distance. But what about the commitment to educate the children during the pandemic? If schools don't open up more for the K through 5 levels, and we continue the hybrid hours as they are, then at least let's make an effort to make the at-home portion of the hybrid program a true educational experience. This shouldn't be a bye-year. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Graham. Next is Rory Dominic.
Hi everybody, thanks again for all of your hard work. I know I'm a familiar face in email. I just briefly wanted to thank the Hauser staff for making it possible for our children to come back 4 days a week. My 7th grader told me last night, we're on our way up to bed, "Mom, I'm so excited for Friday." And I thought it's because we're going to Pinstripes. And I said, "Oh, why?" And he's like, "Because I get to go to school with everybody." And I cannot impress upon you how important the social and emotional piece of this is. The education is duly important, but for me, hearing that my son was excited to go back to school and he literally cannot wait. I mean, when do you ever hear that from a 7th grade boy? So I just want to make sure that we are thinking about that for our elementary students. I don't have an elementary student anymore, but I feel implored to just impress upon you guys that I can appreciate that that remote is working for some students, and I think that that's great. I think that they still have the opportunity to stay remote, and so we need to then look at these kids that need more in person and say, how can we make that happen? Because the remote people, if they're doing well, bravo, I'm so happy for them. But the hybrid students that are not doing well are really not doing well. My own son's math scores dropped 10 points. So I am concerned, and I really want to make sure that we are having real discussions about how we're going to do better before the end of this year. Pat on the back to everybody for getting us in person from the get-go. It's time to now pat ourselves on the back again on whatever the last day of school is, June 5th, and say we did it. We were the model, we did it right, and we made it better and better every step of the way and not be complacent. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dominic. Last for in-person comment we have is Michelle Hudelson.
Hello everyone, I'm Michelle Hudelson. I have a student at Hauser and a student at Ames, and 2 who've already passed on through D96. Thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to speak again tonight. I just have a few comments or clarifications or points I wanted to make after reviewing the agenda and the COVID instructional considerations. First, I noticed that there's a discrepancy and a continued discrepancy between the learning opportunities for our 6th through 8th grade students when compared to our K through 5 students. For example, from the beginning in August of 2020, Hauser was set up to have direct teacher instruction for math, ELA, science, social studies, and electives for a total of 4.5 hours a day of direct instruction, whether at home or in person, while K through 5 was solely math and ELA at only 2.5 hours per day. If the rationale for this was that elementary grades need more focus and foundation with ELA and math, I could agree. However, these students have only received approximately 1 hour of math and 1 hour of ELA per day since the beginning of the year. If their day was 4 hours of direct instruction with 2 hours dedicated to each of those subjects, that would be far more equitable to our students and more reasonable. In addition, teachers at Hauser often have open office hours via Zoom, where students have had opportunities to check in, ask for clarification, ask for assistance, or other things they may need throughout the school year or school day. K through 5 students have not had opportunities that I am aware of to get assistance in any subject area, even ELA and math. The result of this extremely limited teaching time, coupled with no opportunity for clarification or additional assistance, has increased the academic stress for many of our K through 5 students this year. Second, is stated on the 5th page or the slide titled Revisit the Return to Learn Plan Elementary, August 2020. It states that scheduled at-home asynchronous half-day, music, art, PE, science, social studies, supplemental math, and ELA. 30 minutes of a lesson or asynchronous assignment 4 out of 5 days is hardly what I would consider a half day. Yes, students receive some additional worksheets or assignments, but it has been what would typically be sent home as homework during a normal regular school day during the school year. The asynchronous portion of the day has been very lacking in substance and in time for the school year, with approximately 120 minutes weekly, not daily. Third, Hauser has rapidly found a way to increase instructional days to 4 days in person. My child there has had a shift in his schedule and with teachers, but it was made possible. Hauser's also offering after-school activities. Yet as I read through the agenda and the slides that are titled Challenges to Increase Learning Opportunities and Other Challenges Logistical, they mostly seem to apply to our K through 5 students. Why is that? As disclosed at last month's board meeting, the K-5 educational model selected was the most challenging learning model for increased in-person learning opportunities for our K-5 students, while the most adaptable model was used for our 6th through 8th grade students. Also, there was only a plan to pivot to remote, but never a plan to increase instructional time for our students. Yet the Hauser administration has made this work after parents asked for more time. What are the results of the parent surveys for the K-5 learners? Finally, the agenda says that this matter will not be revisited until April 7th. What can be done to expedite this process so our students can begin to receive a more complete and more comprehensive education for the remainder of the school year? If in-person learning is not increased for whatever reason, I plead with you to improve and increase the remote portion of the day for all of our K-5 students, to include more direct teaching as soon as possible. They deserve and crave a quality education. I sympathize that any type of restructuring will be extensive, time-consuming, extremely challenging. And I say this most respectfully. However, this is what you're responsible for doing, in spite of how difficult and challenging it may be. Many other districts have done it since the beginning of the year, or have pivoted mid-year, or have just solidified plans to start in the coming days or coming weeks. I sincerely thank you all in advance for your time and effort in making these desperately needed improvements in learning opportunities for our K-5 students. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Hudelson. Is there any additional public comment? I know we have several emails to read, but any additional in-person public comment? All right, as a note, I think I discussed with Linda Murphy, the vice president, before the meeting began. We have 11 public comments to read. I think we're going to alternate, so I will read the first and we will alternate. All right, the first one I have is from Sarah Zimmerman. I want to voice my concern with the current in-person learning being implemented and what is being planned for the future in District 96. I have 2 students at Hauser, and although they are getting more in-person learning than they were at the beginning of the school year, we all know it is not even close to sufficient. I also have a 4th grader at Central, and I feel the exact same about the 2.5 hour of in-person learning she is getting a week. It is not sufficient. Most districts around us have figured it out, and all Catholic schools, including the one in our own town, has had it figured out since the beginning of the school year. People move to Riverside and pay taxes because of our schools, because of the principals, teachers, and staff who teach our kids and can give them the opportunity to learn in an environment that will help them succeed and do their best. It is time for us to get back to exactly that. There are no restrictions in Illinois against an in-person learning. All teachers and staff are able to get vaccinated. Saliva testing is available, and mask wearing, sanitizing, and other safety rules have not only been proven to work against spreading COVID, but have already been in place for children during the school days. We have to devote our time, energy, and resources into getting our children back to school 5 full days a week. Too much time has gone by, and we need to do better for our children. We need to do better for the working parents of these children, and we need to do better for our town. None of this has been easy, and the year has been a tough one to say the least, but I know together the parents, teachers, staff, and school board can make this happen. Sincerely, Sarah Zimmerman.
All right, I'll go to the next one. This one is from Maria Munch. Good afternoon, well, good evening. My name is Maria Munch, and I currently have a 1st and 4th grader at Ames. I truly appreciate that my kids have been able to return to in-person learning via the hybrid model this year. I think great safety precautions have been taken and things were handled well. With the metrics dropping, saliva screenings happening in our district, and more people getting vaccinated, including teachers, I think it is extremely important to focus on more in-person live teaching for elementary students for the 2021-2022 school year in the fall. I really hope the board and school district is putting all effort and focus on getting our kids back to school full time. I think it is not only important for them for educational purposes, but also for their mental health.
I know that there are guidelines we have to continue to follow, but possibly decreasing the 6 feet apart distance to 3 feet apart while continuing with mask wearing would be an acceptable option. I am asking as a concerned parent with the hopes that my concerns are taken into consideration by the board and that you are doing everything possible to get our kids back into the classroom for longer periods of time for the upcoming school year. I appreciate all our district has done during this pandemic for our children, but I'm hopeful that we are moving steps closer to having our kids back in school. Thank you, Maria Munch.
The next one I have is from Maggie Rizzo. D96 Board and Superintendent Ryan Toy, I am writing to you today to implore you to bring our K through 5 kids back to school full day, 5 days a week for this last trimester. Since March of last year, our kids have pivoted, have paused, have adapted, have gone with the flow, and done whatever has been asked of them to learn while keeping each other and their teachers and adults outside of school safe. It is now time to think of our students and have them stop making every sacrifice possible for us and start making some choices that may not make everyone happy, but that will get them back in school full time. Since September, the students have shown that they can social distance at school, they can wear masks, they can be diligent hand washers, and that those things work to stop the spread of the virus within school. The kids can do what's asked of them, and what's being asked works. We know bringing the kids back full-time means they will likely be closer than 6 feet. We know eating lunch at school poses some risk since they'll be unmasked. But we also know, at Ames for example, there is underutilized space, the gym or early learners area and the library, where kids could be spread out for lunch. There is also a good chance when the weather breaks outside could also be utilized. Our kids having 2.5 hours of in-person instruction isn't enough time at all. The remote work they're given from their homeroom teachers is not sufficient to make up for the time lost in the classroom. The remote specials are insufficient and frankly time wasters more often than not. The amount of Zooms I listen to that are 10 minutes of attendance and only 20 minutes of instruction are too many to count. And the recorded Zooms are not helpful and don't engage the kids. Specials are built for in-person learning. We appreciate the effort that these teachers have made, but them being remote just doesn't translate. With the mitigations already in place at the schools, the saliva screening, teacher availability to vaccine, and other districts and Catholic schools making in-person work, we can and should get our K through 5 students back in the classroom full-time, 5 days a week, as soon as possible. I know bringing them back may mean a different teacher or a different routine, but I think we all know that kids will do what they've done since March 13th, 2020. They will adapt. I'm now asking the board, the superintendent, and the teachers to adapt to bringing the kids back full-time. Thank you for your consideration and diligence in this matter. Best, Maggie Rizzo, Ames parent.
The next one is from Erica Siebert. Hi, I'm a parent of
3rd and 1st graders at Central. I would love to see longer in-person learning for the rest of the school year. I haven't talked to any parents that don't want this. People seem to be fine with a distance of 3 to 6 feet as long as masks are present. When they are in lines and moving around, the 6 feet doesn't always stay exact now. Also, many students play sports right now with masks, and the 6 feet is not mandatory. School should be a priority, and if they can do it in sports, they certainly should be able to go to school. Since families have managed to adapt to a short in-person day, I would assume that most can have their kids come home for lunch. Some would probably be in a situation where they no longer have childcare, and this would be an issue. I think assuming that at least half could go home, then the rest should easily be able to socially distance with over 6 feet while they eat. I personally think Central should utilize the gym, the new multi-purpose room, the cafeteria, etc., in any ways possible to make increased in-person learning a reality. The mental health of kids being home so much is concerning. Please take this into consideration. I'm not alone in my thoughts. Thanks, Erica Siebert.
All right, the next one is from Colleen SmithParker. Thank you for leading the way back to in-person learning for the districts in our area. I am incredibly grateful that my kids have had in-person learning this school year, and I would be delighted if they could get more. I have witnessed how difficult this year has been for students who are given no option other than 100% remote. Some of those students were at the same time same level of learning as my children last school year and are now noticeably behind. Some are suffering depression-like symptoms from being so isolated from their peers. It's not lost on me that this is also happening with kids in our district who are doing hybrid learning. While we have tried, the comfort and security of our kids feel while at school, physically at school, is severely blunted with the hybrid plan. It breaks my heart when I think of the long-term damage we are doing to kids, academically, socially, developmentally. This is a topic I discuss with our pediatrician at every visit. She is in Oak Park and is saddened by what she's seen with the kids in the district and in that district and others. My kids are engaged and happy at school. They love their teachers and they love being with their friends. They got used to the masks and distancing. They find remote learning challenging with all the distractions at home. It's not for lack of trying on my part when I'm home from work and our nanny's part, but siblings and toys and snacks and so much more pull their attention away from their iPad. I know I'm not alone in facing these challenges. We are all doing our best, but hybrid learning is not a long-term solution that is in the best interest of our children. It was a band-aid solution that, again, I'm incredibly grateful for, but it's time to shift back to 100% in-person for the many families that want that. Colleen SmithParker, Ames First and Kindergarten.
This next one is from Kathy Dawn. Hello, it's heartbreaking the circumstances that our kids are faced with. Many of us want our children back on campus full-time and taught traditionally. There are no more legitimate barriers to safe, full-time, on-campus instruction 5 days a week. Neither the state nor the county has a prohibition against in-person schooling. Vaccines are now available for all teachers. Many other local districts have been completely in-person all day, 5 days a week since August. All available creative energy, resources, and ideas must be dedicated in their entirety to getting the kids back in school full-time. This should have been the case since last spring. The unfortunate past cannot be changed, but we still have a chance to learn from prior mistakes and get innovative now. As parents and taxpayers, and on behalf of our long-suffering children, I'm asking we see an immediate, safe return to normal. Please make getting D96 back to full-time, in-person schooling your top priority. Thank you, Kathy Dawn.
Okay, the next one is from Kelly Bowen Z. First, I commend the teachers, staff, and principals at D96 who have been at the forefront petitioning to get our children back in school. That is exactly the kids of support we hope to get from our children's educators. With that said, I know there is uncertainty within the district as to how parents feel with more in-person learning. Our children need to go back to school 5 full days a week in person and do it as soon as possible. There is enough data to provide our district employees with the reassurance they need that children are not the super spreaders of the virus and that the safety measures currently in place are and will continue to be enough to keep our community safe. On top of those procedures, now having saliva testing and the option for teachers to get vaccinated is an even greater reason to increase in-person learning. If 67% of students were already enrolled in hybrid, and we have a potential increase up to 71% of students in hybrid for the 3rd semester, it's obvious. The rest of the community is starting to become more comfortable with an increased amount of exposure, and we should take that into consideration. Other important concerns, I feel, are not being given enough attention and consideration are: 1, the families with 2 full-time working parents or single parents with full-time jobs. We count on our children to be in school majority of our work days. I know the stress and anxiety this pandemic has caused for me personally, wondering what my next workday will look like, trying to schedule appointments and calls while having to parent and now educate my kids on top of running my own business has been extremely stressful. And I know many other families who have felt the same. As an essential worker myself, I have had to overcome the fears and concerns of this pandemic in order to continue providing my clients with the best level of service. And the reality of my profession is that if I modify what I do, don't show up full time, my clients will find someone else who will. I believe all essential workers should view their careers this way. 2, our children are suffering, and I say that word with extreme emphasis. Suffering, not just struggling socially and emotionally, and many of them are struggling academically. The fear of one child having new social and emotional challenges as a result of this pandemic is horrifying and heartbreaking. And unfortunately, I know more than one child at the elementary and junior high levels within our district who have started therapy for depression and anxiety. In Riverside, our schools are, have been, and always should be another safe place for our children. Let's welcome our children back and show them that we can get through tough times together. I end by stressing again, our children need to go back to school 5 full days a week in person and do it as soon as possible. Thank you for your time. Kelly Bowensy.
This next one is from Nicole Ungaro.
Hello, I am writing as a mom of 3 elementary school students at Ames School. I would like to start by saying that I've been incredibly thankful for the opportunity to easily communicate with the school board and superintendent. Each time I reach out, I do get a thoughtful response, and I'm very appreciative of all the time and planning that everyone who works in District 96 has done. When we started pivoting to a hybrid model nearly a year ago, I was so thankful for the time the staff at Ames put into getting the kids in school and was really happy given the circumstances that they were able to go to school safely. As a working mom who has adjusted to doing my job remotely to accommodate my kids' schedule, it was a huge adjustment for our family as I juggled multiple meetings and deadlines along with kids' Zooms, specials, and homework. Through all the frustrations, I took great pride in seeing that the kids were doing okay. They were so resilient, and even through days with tears and frustration, we made it work. We made it work, and I've continued to be so proud of the adjustments they made. As the COVID numbers ebbed and flowed, I watched carefully as we took some time to be remote and then came back to hybrid, and I eagerly anticipated the saliva screening as a means of getting back to more learning. The statistics have told us that kids aren't spreading it to one another. That, coupled with saliva screening and the steep drops in numbers and vaccines becoming readily available, I believe would be the catalyst to get us back to school for a longer day. I think we have all reached a point of frustration, and I'm extremely concerned that we haven't heard that there has been any movement in that direction for the remainder of this year, and even more shockingly, for the start of the next school year. When I chose the hybrid plan, I assumed that would be put in place as a temporary means, and I'm asking for more learning time for our kids. By the time the kids get to school and take attendance and get settled, they are learning for 2 hours a day. Although I appreciate the library Zoom in the afternoon becoming a platform for more social studies and science, it is often a pre-recorded Zoom, as are portions of the other Zooms, or continuations of past projects, which honestly just make for more frustration at home for both the kids and myself. If it isn't possible to increase time in school and we aren't able to accommodate more time for them to add a social component to their day, I would also be interested in more live learning from home, because right now it seems as if we are failing on both accounts, academically and socially. As we know, many school districts around us have moved towards more time in the classroom, including Hauser in our own district, which begs the question, why can't we move in that direction as well? In my opinion, we came out of the gates handling all of the challenges COVID brought us very efficiently and as a leader to other districts around us, and it seems now we are lacking compared to the other schools and districts. I look forward to hearing that decisions have been made for all the kids in this district who deserve so much more than what we are currently getting. Thank you for your time, Nikki Ungaro.
Okay. The next one here is from Christine Hull. We have all witnessed the success of the district's implementation of safe in-person instruction. Add to the advent of the vaccine and the encouraging metrics of its robust effectiveness and the recently expanded instruction time at Hauser. We have seen what we are capable of in these constantly changing times. Let's now discuss what more can be done safely in the elementary schools in person. Time to really weigh the benefits of expanded in-person instruction against the true rates of risk, not our fears. I feel confident that students' ongoing mental health and academic progress can be weighed in conjunction with staff and student safety, and that the district can address both in a plan for expanded in-school instruction. Christine Hull, Ames parent.
The next one is from Denise Umbricht. Dear District 96 board members, we have 2 children at Ames Elementary
And are writing in support of extending in-classroom learning. We believe this is critical for our children's continued development. If for some reason the in-classroom cannot be extended, we ask that the asynchronous portion is more challenging and structured. Our children are becoming too reliant on apps and have way too much free time while at home. While we are aware of the many obstacles with this school year, we hope and ask that systems be put in place for next year and that the children are back in the classroom full time. Thank you, Denise and Dave Umbrick.
Okay, and the last one I have is from Susan and Matt Wolf, Ames parents, to Superintendent Ryan Toy and the District 96 school board members. Thank you for the work to keep our kids in school this year. District 96 was creative and went to great lengths to offer some in-person return to learning in the fall. We are grateful for the dedicated team that made it work when times were still very uncertain. With each day, we know more now about how in-person school can work. D96 made a smart pivot in the fall, and we believe we can do it again to strengthen the school offering between now and the end of the year. We don't have the benefit of the voice-over in advance of the meeting, but we have two concerns after reviewing the COVID considerations deck prepared for the discussion. One, not regrouping on this topic until April 7th. We are hopeful preliminary feedback from the community survey can be shared tonight, gauging interest in expanding in-person learning for K through 5. Knowing how fast the district made hybrid and remote learning available in the fall, it is possible to give the same sense of urgency to make changes again to further improve the in-person learning opportunities for our kids or the asynchronous learning, should the case may be. It feels like we could be at the end of the year before revisiting or implementing potential changes or improvements. It is comforting to see many experts point to continued masking, hand washing, open windows, perfect timing for April and May, ongoing vaccinations of teachers, and the bonus of doing our own saliva testing. 2, limited details on improving the instructional time if we can't add in any more in-person learning. If it is just not possible, or the survey shows limited interest for a return to in-school instruction, we would ask the district to please revisit the asynchronous time for students, and with the same sense of urgency noted above. Can the district reinvigorate the program to provide for more engaging live and online teaching? More access to teachers, homeroom or others? The at-home work the kids are doing now feels like homework in a typical year and takes little time to complete. We don't know the answer to this and defer to the experts, but the asynchronous time as it is, combined with 2.5 hours of in-person, 30 minutes of a special 3 or 4 days a week, and 20 minutes of a few apps no longer feels an acceptable level of the quality education we know District 96 delivers. We understand that this is a complicated puzzle in an extremely complicated time, and appreciate the work to date. We are happy to engage in any discussion if that can help in any way. Thank you for your time. Susan and Matt Wolf, Ames parents. Kathy, is there any additional public comment? Okay. All right, then that will take us back to the agenda. At this time, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? All right, if not, we will move on to committee reports. The first report is the Education Committee.
I know Sherry's unable to be here tonight as Education Committee Chair. I think, Wesley, you were going to just say a few words as a way of welcoming our Education Committee report.
Yeah, kind of stepping in, and we don't really have a board member comment since this isn't a regular meeting, so I guess it's not really public comment since we make public comments at every meeting, but just want to be clear, not speaking for the board. A lot of this is just personal feedback with just knowledge that I have. So I've been doing a significant amount of outreach to various parents. I've been trying to cross schools of people that I know to try to get feedback from their groups, trying to get outside of my own little circles where I can, being locked in and not having the same social environment that we usually have to have these side conversations in public, in person. And I think one of the narrative that I've been hearing is usually focused on the going back in person, which I don't think, in my perspective, anybody here is trying not to go back in person. I think we all want to go back in person. I think it's really a matter of how we go back in person and when we go back in person and whether we can do that safely. the public guidance on safety parameters are all over the place, and I'm not going to get into any of that because I think some of that's going to be addressed through the slideshow that we have here tonight and kind of helping bring everybody to center of where we are. I've seen a number of emails, I've had a number of conversations where there's a lot of I heard this, I heard that, and I'm hoping tonight we can kind of level set on what is true, what is partially true, and just what is not true. I've heard some feedback of just flat out false information that I've been a little bit surprised by. So hopefully we can cover some of that tonight. And yeah, just mainly just kind of wanted to level set that, like, the community is being very outspoken, and I appreciate that. I think everybody here appreciates that. It really helps guide us in what we need to do and how we need to communicate. And hopefully, much like we did on the Return to Learn plan, this will at least level set where we are and what next steps that we're trying to consider and show the work that is being done that we have talked about in bits and pieces over time, but we have not done it holistically or collectively. So hopefully this is bringing that together for everybody, and we can continue the dialogue from here. So that's really I wanted to say. Just, again, personal perspective on the work being done and the feedback that I've been collecting. Not trying to make comments as, speaking for the board or anything like that. So I just want to be just perfectly clear on that.
Before you dive in, we didn't touch on the slide report, and I sort of want to bring that up because it seems like pretty much everyone's brought that up at some point this evening in public comment. I do know that we have like a over 70% consenting rate, but I look at the participation. We've been watching the participation over the past several weeks, and it's generally always about 50%. And even as of last week, the week of February 19th, we weren't even at 20%. And so
That was also due to the snowstorm.
That was a strange
okay.
week.
Okay, so that was a good question. But I mean, still, we're only hovering around 50%, and so people are saying about the saliva screening. We really need, if 72% people participate, we need 72% participation. I don't understand why people. I mean, this is a key component of going back to school. I mean, we need to have that participation rate higher. So I just do want to point that out, though, because that has been brought up numerous times tonight.
Yeah, and I'll just share some comments about that during the presentation also.
One note, is it possible, whoever's putting this together, could we get all, like, the history, just so that we can see that more? It's always been in these 2-week rolling chunks. I don't know, could we just get, like, every week cumulative?
Oh, the saliva screen?
For the saliva screen, I'm sorry, yeah.
Our tech team's been looking at improving that data, so I think we can continue to look at that, certainly.
It's just, I have to go back to each other board meeting to get the prior week, and if it could just be kind of a rolling number rather than just 2
Right,
weeks.
and
I think
that
that'd be
February
helpful.
week looks very strange. It was President's Day, and it was the snow day, and it
Yep.
was everything.
And I think we only
the schedule
tested
shifted a lot.
4 through 8. I don't even think we didn't test K through 3, I believe, so I noticed that too, Dave, and then it dawned on me that that's because we didn't test most of the population.
I forgot about the snowstorm.
Yeah, but it is still low, to your point.
Right.
Like, we'd like to see those numbers go up.
All right, so we put together a presentation tonight, and I want to thank the board for this opportunity to share this with all of you, and thank you for the many conversations that we have had along the way. And I want to thank our leadership team for being here to participate in the presentation. This is always an interesting time, being in the middle of a pandemic. I guess I don't ever want to say always on that. I really hope it ends someday, not too far from now. But what you're not going to hear tonight is any specific recommendation in our plan, but really a critical overview that I hope is, as Wesley pointed out, just clearing up some misconceptions, sharing more about the purpose and the priorities, and really, honestly, our commitment in all of this, that we made a commitment to in-person learning at the beginning of the year. We also made a commitment to supporting our remote learning students to the same level and the same degree of rigor. That there are certainly challenges in what we're going to share tonight. This is a group that I know, this is a leadership team that I know has never backed down from challenges, and I have great confidence that we will continue to problem solve as we have been all year long in looking at this. I think one of our greatest challenges in all this, there are many, is certainly that we know that whatever we decide to do in moving forward is that it is not possible to please 100% of our students and families in this process. So we will do what we always do, and that is put students' needs at the center of all this. And for us, our students' needs are, during a pandemic and always, first and foremost, their health and safety. Obviously, their learning is our highest priority. It's our institution, it's what we stand for, and it's what we do. And also, we hear the concerns about mental health, and we have certainly placed that as a high priority as well. So with that, what we do want to do tonight, if you just want to advance the slide, we do want to share with all of you, kind of revisit that original Return to Learn plan. And it's not to rehash old news, it's really to speak to the priorities that were clearly established by a very collaborative team at that time. We want to discuss what's been going on since the implementation of that plan back on September 2nd, 2020. Because there's been a lot that's gone on, and perhaps that's been more behind the scenes. That obviously is the work of our administrators and our teachers in doing that. We do want to talk about considerations for making improvements. I think it's best to frame it as how do we improve the current student learning opportunities for our students, because again, I always want to remind everyone that we have 30% of our families in an all-remote plan and program by their preference and by their choosing. I'm certainly hearing the comments about the asynchronous part of the day, and we're certainly looking at the in-person expansion as well. So with that, I know Angela's going to revisit for us that August 2020 plan. I believe it was August 5th or August 6th that we presented that to the entire community.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for your time and consideration tonight. Just want to take some time to revisit our Return to Learn plan from August and talk about the priorities that we set as a committee and why we made the decisions that we made. The Return to Learn plan was collaboratively developed from staff members and administrators on the team. And as a committee, we knew that we needed to focus on remote learning and on a hybrid learning plan. So we talked about both remote and hybrid because we weren't at a point that we knew we could go all in person. As a committee with the staff members said, we know how to do in-person learning, all in-person learning. So we need to work on what our remote will look like and what our hybrid will look like should we have to go between those two areas. And we also knew that there was a possibility that we would end up, quote unquote, all in person. In fact, I believe at our August presentation, Dr. Ryan Toy had stated that she believed at some point we would see all three iterations, remote, hybrid, and an all-in model. But as a committee, we thought, incorrectly, that all-in would mean what we knew as normal. That with CDC guidelines, IDPH guidelines, if we saw that iteration of all-in, we would be able to return to all-in what we thought was normal. We hadn't thought about, at that time in August, that we would be able to come back all in person with still having social distancing guidelines and all of that. So hindsight's 2020, but as we started to move through the year, you'll see throughout this presentation that we did start to think about what will it look like to bring more kids in with social distancing, without social distancing, and then you also hear about how we've been throughout the year working through that. At the elementary level, we prioritize seeing students every day. So we talked a lot as a committee about, do we have two different models? Do we have an elementary model and then a separate junior high model? But really, having separate models met different needs. And so at the elementary level, our teachers felt strongly we need to see our students 5 days a week. They wanted to see the youngest learners for consistency in instruction, as well as just for consistency in seeing their teacher and their peers. If you think about the beginning of the year, coming off of a remote learning, emergency learning period, we were thinking about, especially our primary students, if we had them coming in at the AD model like the junior high, we would have kindergarten and first grade kids and second grade kids coming in for 2 days a week, then learning remotely for 3 days a week, and then having to work through that transition again of now you're back in for 2 days a week. So as an elementary team, we really felt that what was important for our youngest learners was having the consistency of being in school 5 days a week. The concern was, how do we do that? We needed to do something that would help us with social distancing. We needed to reduce the number of students in the building, so that meant we had to split them in half, which is how we landed at the elementary level on an AM/PM model. We wanted to make sure our plan could move to remote seamlessly. We wanted to make sure that we'd be able to continue with our instruction, and so we worked on a plan that would help with that seamless transition to remote, and what we again thought would be a seamless transition to all in person. We had the consideration for the return to normal when we knew it would be deemed safe to do so, and we emphasized the importance of building classroom community for age-appropriate supports and social-emotional learning, which was that whole having that consistency of 5 days a week. We wanted at the elementary level to ensure all students had similar experiences regardless of their preferred learning environment. So we wanted to make sure our in-person model mirrored our remote learning academy. We wanted to make sure that no matter what model you chose, you had the same experience. The day was inclusive of our teacher plan time, our contractual teacher plan time, and the contractual lunch hour for teachers. So what parents experienced then was, or what we experienced as teachers, was that they were still working from 8 to 3. Their lunch hour and plan time were put together in the middle of the day so that they were teaching in the morning, had their luncheon, contractual luncheon plan, and then teaching in the afternoon. We scheduled the at-home's asynchronous half day to include library, music, art, and PE for 30 minutes a day, one of each of those each day. Science and social studies work, social studies being taught by our librarians, and science being work that was given by the classroom teacher, and then providing supplemental math and ELA work. As we talked about this in August, and as we planned with teachers over Institute Day and our remote learning planning days in the beginning of the year, we talked about the expectation of rigorous work and ensuring that that asynchronous time was a full 2.5 hours of instruction. Best laid plans. Didn't work out the way any of us would have wanted, and as Dr. Ryan Toy said, we do hear that concern, and it is a continuous conversation of our leadership team. Go ahead. At the middle school level, the decision was for students to attend in person twice a week. And the reason why we landed on twice a week, and Mr. Harbalis and Ms. May can speak to that more, the reason why we landed on twice a week was because we knew we needed more than half a day to meet the what we had put a priority on for junior high students. We wanted to make sure junior high students were able to see all 4 core of their teachers, and we wanted to be sure that we also placed an emphasis on encore as well. We talked many times about if there was a half-day model, having encore be in the asynchronous time, but we felt that that was taking away from the junior high experience of having some of our encore classes. So we wanted to make sure that we had enough time for that. Well, that cut into the half-day model, and so we knew we weren't going to be able to do a half-day model, and we talked about 2 days in, 2 days out, and then everybody being remote. We worked on how we would have students participate when they were remote. We knew we didn't have the staffing as we did at the elementary level to have a remote learning academy, and that we needed all hands on deck to teach the classes on the AD schedule. And so we had all students learning remotely by participating live stream, along with those students who were participating in person. We also knew from experience that it was easier for our junior high students to navigate live streaming than it would be for our primary students, especially our kindergarten and first graders. That is also a constant conversation that we have when we even talk about next year's planning. If there has to be a remote piece, and we don't know that, but we're trying to be sure we're looking at all areas, if there had to be a remote piece, what would that look like? Because we, again, want to improve on what we're doing already. Knowing that it wouldn't work for elementary kids, but that it would work for junior high kids, that's why we landed on, for this plan, the Return to Learn plan in August 2020, why we landed on the junior high students live streaming. This plan also pivoted to remote if necessary, and ensured all students had similar experiences regardless of their preferred learning environment. It was inclusive also of the teacher plan time and lunch hour. We scheduled a full day of school from 8:30 to 2:40, if I'm right, yes, with an at-home asynchronous portion. So students are in school, learning in their core and encore classes from 8:30 to 1. They go home for lunch from 1 to 2, And then from 2 to 2:40, they are to participate in either remote support, band or orchestra, work independently, and during that independent work, they can access their teachers by attending office hours. We had everyone on remote on Wednesdays to again help build community because everybody then was on the same platform.
So we set these key goals, and I think they're worth reiterating. I think they've been already presented as Angela has shared this. Our goal is to ensure, and it always is, to ensure continuous and rigorous student learning for all students regardless of participation in the hybrid or the remote model. Our goal is to engage families to support the overall learning plan for safe in-person learning. We know that the level of family engagement because of that asynchronous part of the day is certainly very unique. Emphasizing the social emotional well-being and mental health of all of our students. So again, I think that's a repetition from what I said just a few minutes ago, but key to make sure that those goals are clear. What have we learned? We do know that children love being in school and we love having them in school. We learned that children are good at mask wearing. I mean, that was one of the things we wondered, would children really tolerate, 2.5 hours in a mask? They do. Kids are good at this. We also know that COVID cases have occurred and have continued to occur. And as this Board of Education knows, I think when we hit about case 3 early in the school year, I was ready to shut the whole thing down and I had to really just calm myself and understand that COVID cases would occur, that our issue was really in-school transmission. What we have seen, or we believe, we have seen is that in-school transmission at the 6 foot of social distancing is not evident through increased positive cases. And that's huge. There are some people that argue that perhaps we just don't have the evidence and we have asymptomatic spread going on, but we do not believe that we have had in-school transmission at the 6 foot social distancing. The saliva participation has been variable and not as good as expected. And we've had a lot of conversations about that. Why not? Our principals have done just really an outstanding job of sending reminders the morning of, sending reminders the night before. We have continued to push out that consent form. So we have looked at many, many different ways to increase that level of participation. And again, I don't really have an answer as to why it's not better. It's an important mitigation measure. It doesn't make the system perfect, but we do believe it improves safety. So we are going to continue to encourage families to participate that. And certainly if we talk about reducing social distancing, which we are going to talk about, again, I think it becomes all the more critical. Our staff have been eager to get vaccinated. We have done many, many things trying to make that process smoother. It has simply been challenging and clunky, and that is not due to the district. I believe that is absolutely due to our public health systems. And again, they are facing huge, huge challenges right now too. We have regularly contacted Walgreens and Osco and Mariano's and Loyola Hospital and Elmhurst Hospital and the County Health Department, and we have not, up until really just this week, been able to find a clear and consistent partner that is willing to vaccinate our educators. So we do believe that despite all of that, our staff, we have made a lot of progress, that we have a high percentage of our staff. We are working on that survey. It's a bit challenging that, again, people do not have to share this medical health information with us. We are asking them voluntarily to share it with us. And I would guess right now that we're at about a 75% vaccination level. So again, and that may be on the high end estimate, but again, I think this is a message to both our staff and to parents that this is something that I believe, again, effort is demonstrated every single day. And one other place we hear about it and we make a contact and we hope that that's going to work out. Just yesterday, our insurance agency reached out and said we might be able to help you. Thank you, yesterday. I needed that, 4 weeks ago. So anyway, I certainly share and I want people to understand that it is not for the district not having money or not having effort to do so. Again, there's a lot of misconceptions in that area and want to take a moment and just clear that up.
Martha, didn't you even offer to the health department to be a vaccination site? So we were proactively trying to do that.
Right.
So.
We had heard that it would roll out through like a regional program, that maybe Riverside Brookfield High School would be a site. Would our school nurses be willing to go there and be trained? I said to them, I've signed you all up to be, vaccinators. I shared with our support staff at the office. I said, you'll all be registration people. So we tried every angle. I think schools were really hopeful that we would be sites right off the bat, and we just weren't. As we all know just from watching the news, right, that the availability of the vaccine is what really became a challenge. Right now, Morton High School is a system. It's what they call a closed system. It's just for educators. So they have now reached out to us and said that they would work on getting our staff that are not vaccinated appointments. So We have about 6 or 7 staff that said they would like to get appointments. Our principals are on alert that if somebody gets a call to go to a 1 o'clock vaccination appointment, they're going to go to their 1 o'clock vaccination appointment, and we're going to find a way to cover that classroom. So again, something we are, continuing to work on, and we're progressing. So, we certainly still have problems we're trying to solve. I think it's been stated here tonight, we want to continue to make more improvements in the student learning opportunities for the remainder of the year. We are considering increased in-person learning time. We are hearing that certainly from our community that is an interest of many. That is not an interest of all, but that's an interest of many. We do know, as you'll hear about tonight, it would require us to modify the social distancing requirements. And again, well, I'm going to leave that to Pam to talk about, but I can say more about that, and certainly in response to any questions you might have. Certainly hearing tonight this idea of making improvements in asynchronous learning. That is something that we will continue to take a long, hard look at. I know our principals are all here tonight, and certainly hearing that as a concern also. We have done a variety of things to offer support to students with the greatest needs, and we're going to talk a little about special education tonight. Also offering opportunities outside the school day. We're going to comment on in just a minute about how we're having some after-school activities. We do have some elementary teachers at the ready, eager to do some things. They are waiting for good weather to do those things. They are springtime activities, and again, we'll share a little bit more about that. So, I know just in terms of continuous planning, we have looked at how do we get all students back in for increased amount of time. Ongoing planning and problem solving. For people who don't know, I know the Board of Education knows this well. Our district leadership team meets every Wednesday afternoon, and we are often in a 3-hour meeting or longer. And I think that every time we think about maybe canceling one of them, there's always something more that we really do need to talk about in regard to educating children during a pandemic. So just want to thank that team. They're sitting in the room here tonight, just a really, really outstanding group. I know each of the principals then has a building leadership team that they work with, probably weekly, that also problem solves and plans around, again, this key issue of educating children during a pandemic. We have that. We have an outstanding nursing team. I will share with you that they feel, as our lead nurse called me the other day, she said, Martha, you know why we've been successful this year in terms of COVID and COVID spread? Is she said, we are so serious about that symptom checker. As some of you might know as parents who might be listening, if your child's had a cough or a sneeze, they are often sent home before they even arrive inside the school door. The temperature checks have certainly been critical. I mean, parents have been great partners in all of this, but our nurses have been very, very strict about all of this, and they really also support the 6-foot social distancing. So again, want to certainly congratulate them and kudos to them, and they still have a lot of hard work in front of them. External collaboration has been really, really key this year. I know I've mentioned it to the Board of Education on multiple times. It has really been an opportunity for me to connect very regularly with superintendents in our region. So we have been meeting weekly since the pandemic started. I think we set up a meeting probably that week of March 13th, and there was a question of, do you want to keep doing this? And every superintendent of our West 40 districts said yes, and we've done it consistently every single Monday since this pandemic started, and it's been everything from looking at vaccine rollout to looking at symptom checking, but always, always, always with this idea of improving student learning opportunities and conferring with each other and collaborating with each other. As you also know, we've had a COVID-19 transition team that really did a lot of hard work in the summer. That group is willing to get back together and continue to take a look at all of this. Again, those leadership team members, and this is some of our internal structures, are already part of what we call an all-district leadership team. They are required to also be participating on the building leadership team. So all along, even though we're kind of convening with a very specific look at the elementary schedule, now they have really been part of a conversation that has been ongoing over the course of the entire year. Touched on this a little bit already, that we have made these incremental changes. The Hauser schedule is one example of that. Hauser after-school activities have already added in basketball, volleyball, and dance. Hauser Band and Orchestra, I will tell you that may be one of the bravest things I think we agreed to do, is allowing our students in band to begin to play together in person, and that's involved things like masking the instruments and making sure that the room was extra well ventilated, playing in a large room, we're using our gymnasiums, etc. They are eager to go outdoors as soon as the weather permits. So again, I just point those out as things that have been part of the ongoing planning in terms of how do we improve the student learning opportunities.
In looking at special education and special groups within districts, we had very clear guidance from ISBE in August that school districts were to provide increased learning opportunities for students with special needs or students in special groups or at risk. And that is one thing that we have taken a look at and have put in place from the very beginning, from early childhood through 8th grade. As we look at that, we have looked at each student individually, and if the team has felt that they are not able to meet what the child needs within that time that they are here, some students are staying a little bit longer in the morning or coming earlier in the afternoon in order to provide the students with what they need. We also have looked at our other students who have struggled with remote learning. Our social workers and psychologists have been working carefully. Teachers have been communicating with the social workers and psychologists if they see that a student is struggling with remote learning, if they're not engaged. And our teachers have done a wonderful job of reaching out and helping the students to be more engaged, have worked with the psychologists and the social workers as well to engage students. And the principals and the social workers have worked with some of the families when they see that a child is not engaged, and they have brought the students in who may have been remote originally, but brought them in for some in-person time as a family to feel comfortable to make sure that their children were engaged in learning.
So we talked a little bit about the external collaboration already. I mentioned how the West 40 school district superintendents meet every single week. Without really getting into specifics around specific districts, but I know this has been a question of the Board of Education. I know this has been a question of a number of parents too, in terms of looking at how is this model chosen. I know Angela shared that when we did the revisit of our plans. But these variety of starting points really do seem to create different opportunities at this point in the school year for different districts. So I just want to point some of that out. That the AM-PM, that's what I really call what we have, this AM-PM class, is probably the hardest one to shift because it really involves some kind of undoing of the other half of the day. On one hand, it was our great sort of point of pride around really being able to see children every day and prioritize that core instruction. Our teachers, though, as you know, have a full complement of, they see two different groups of students, and it was how we were able to get the number of students that wanted to be in person, how we were able to get them into the schools. So again, I will tell you that the other districts that I am aware of that are following the AM-PM plan are finding that there are certainly challenges in how to make these shifts and changes. But we are spending a lot of time talking to each other and looking at some options. The idea that there were AM classes for everyone, that there were a number of districts that brought children in for part of the day, and then they've been over time able to expand that part of the day. So in several districts that I know about, many districts perhaps, again, children came in, the teachers had either extended plan time or office hours or something going on in the afternoon, and they were able to slowly but surely increase that time where teachers were spending directly with students. So again, they had flexibility in terms of that other half of the day, or they have that flexibility. And again, as we've pointed out, our teachers are already with a different group of students. The AB model, we've talked about this. This is the model that was chosen for Hauser, chosen with our middle school students in mind and a middle school schedule in mind. And again, that was a conscious decision we made for elementary to be on a different model than our middle school students. I'm not saying it's easy to make those changes, but it's bringing in children more, and it's not necessarily the adjustment to scheduling and undoing a different part of the day so much as it's bringing in more children. We're going to talk about Hauser a little bit more. I know Chris and April are going to chat about that. Also, the changes we're able to make at Hauser right now still allow us to socially distance, and I think, again, that's key. Certainly families or family schools that were on a full remote schedule and have been able to kind of just reopen. We know a number of school districts in the area that have reopened here like in February, let's say, right? That they were able to plan from a sort of the blank slate of going from full remote to some in person. So again, as we compare school districts, the one thing I can assure people is that the collaboration going on between school districts is strong. It's great that there is a shared purpose in getting children the best possible educational opportunities in the midst of a pandemic as we can possibly do, but that each school, its enrollment, it's the physical capacity of the school itself, It's the instructional schedules that are put together. So again, it's very much part of the challenge, and I know there have been a lot of questions about that why don't we do what this school district is doing, or have we thought about what this school district is doing? And again, even many of our leaders, I know their own children are in some of those school districts, and we compare notes an awful lot. So anyway, I do want to share that piece of it. I think it's critical to just coming to that shared understanding.
Martha?
Yeah.
Just real quick, if you just Google West 40, you should be able to find their website pretty easily, but do you mind giving just like a quick overview of like what that is, just for folks that might not be familiar with that?
Sure. So West 40 are the West Cook County school districts, West Cook County suburban school districts. So obviously it eliminates the city of Chicago, and then it speaks to Cook County. Cook County is divided into North Cook, West Cook, and South Cook. So it is, I actually think it's actually 39 school districts and not really 40, so the name isn't entirely correct, but it is for us in our area. It certainly involves, Brookfield, the LaGrange area school districts, Bowen school districts. It's our very immediate neighbor, sort of on up to then maybe like the O'Hare Airport area, Norridge, Penoyer, that area. In terms of how far west, it's wherever the DuPage County line comes in. So I'm trying to think of.
I know Western Springs is one that people brought up, they're part of it.
Western Springs is part of it. Western Springs is a district that also is on an AM/PM model. So it's a superintendent that I've talked with quite a bit.
Just to get some people's
Sure.
background, kind of like what you're talking
Yeah.
about. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Ryan Joy talked about her collaborations weekly with other superintendents within the West 40 network. I also collaborate with my counterparts in the West 40 collaboration. We meet monthly, and then we've had lots of conversations in between those monthly meetings. Dr. Ryan Toy will talk to superintendents and get that 25,000-foot view of the changes they're making, and then I contact and work with the curriculum directors in those districts to talk about the specifics and how are you making this work? How are you making this happen? Specifically, Sarah Coffey at Western Springs and I have been talking quite a bit on how they made the AM/PM model work so that we could see just talk about the challenges that they've had, as well as working together to try to problem solve them and see what our options might be. As Dr. Ryan Toy mentioned, so many districts started from so many different starting points. And those different starting points led to different paths towards increasing time. But they do lead to similar considerations and similar challenges. So I wanted to look at those really quick. Through that external collaboration, what we've talked about is with an AM/PM model, with any model, you have to look at adjusting the class sizes because most districts reduce class sizes to meet the social distancing needs. And so we have to adjust class sizes. Right now, our schedule provides for classes to be split in half for social distancing purposes. And to increase time, we have to look at the possibility of combining those classes to free up time for the teachers to teach into that other part of the day. This could cause an adjustment in class sizes, and for us here in District 96, that could mean classes might have a population of students in the upper 20s. Because of some of these adjusted class sizes, could lead to larger classes, we would, let me back up. Looking at possible classroom teacher changes comes from the fact that those classes could be larger than what we'd even see in normal times. When we were looking at the combination of AM/PM schedules, we have some classes that are upwards of 26 or 27 students. And so when we look at that, we start to think that, what do we do to handle that? Do we put all 26 or 27 kids in the class? Do we move some kids out of that? Do we cap some of those classes? So some of those are some of the decisions and challenges that we look at. We also have to know that increasing students in a class means that we would have to reduce social distancing. And all of us, all the districts, are working to explore how do you address lunch? How do you address serving lunch to students, where you serve them, if you serve them? How do we modify our lunch plans as we look to increase time? As a result of exploring all these considerations, Dr. Ryan Toy and I have talked to some districts that have said we can't do it. And so there are some districts that have chosen to not increase instructional time at this point.
So now we're going to discuss a little bit, share with you some of the challenges we have faced as we look to increase the learning opportunities and extending our school day. And some of these challenges I'm going to talk about right now really have more to do at the elementary level as it was mentioned earlier, that Hauser has been able to keep that 6 feet distance. So when we began in August, we shared with the community that we would be following the guidance of the CDC and IDPH. And that's what we would take our guidance from. When it comes to social distancing, it has been mentioned that there's various guidance. There's CDC guidance, there's IDPH and ISBE guidance. There's been information out there from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and yet at the same time, we are told that we can have local control and considerations. School districts are told that we are to follow the CDC guidance. The CDC guidance at this time is saying that we should, and we are required for that 6-foot distance for social distancing. They refer to it, and the nurses and Dr. Martha and Toy and myself, we are listening to CDC guidance all the time. And even last Friday, they kept reiterating that 6 feet is the gold standard. It is the gold standard. IDPH has said 6 feet. Well, if ISBE as much as possible. There's conflicting information from that you may have heard from the American Academy of Pediatrics, which has said 3 feet. But school districts are to take their guidance from the CDC. So when we look at the social distancing, the impact on class size or teacher assignment, as was just mentioned, some of our classes, if we put our AM and PM together that we looked at, the classes could range from 14 to 27 students. So given that numbers, there are classes that we would not be able to have the 6-foot social distancing at this time. The reason, as we mentioned, when we went to AM and PM, was that was the way that we could accommodate the 6-foot distancing. So right now, if a student is positive, because we're at that 6-foot mark in all directions around a positive student, we do not have to quarantine the children who are around that student who is positive. If we were to go less than 6 feet, if a student was positive, the other students who are around that child who is positive, even when masked, would need to quarantine for 14 days. You've probably heard some information out there too about the new 10-day quarantine and 7-day quarantine. CDC has made that very clear that that is for adults and that children must quarantine for 14 days. So we would still be at that 14-day mark for our students if we were to go less than the 6 feet and a student was positive. So there is that to take in consideration, that we may have more schedule changes for families if there was a positive case. So it's just something to keep in mind.
So can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Following so it doesn't sound like if we did open the schools back up, like full-time or what, we wouldn't follow the CDC, we wouldn't be able to follow the CDC guidance for 6 feet.
From what I understand and from what principals have looked at their classrooms, not in all rooms.
So I guess my question is, what are the consequences? What would happen if we just say, okay, we opened the schools, we went back and didn't keep the 6 feet? I mean, are there any consequences to that, our action?
Do you want me to take it?
Yeah.
So we are governed by the Illinois Department of Public Health. If we had an outbreak, the Illinois Department of Public Health does have the authority to shut us down. It is something that they monitor. Again, as we've said, with our 6-foot social distancing, we have not seen in-school transmission to a level that's evident to us. We know that some school districts that are doing this, right, and I know this is probably in the minds of certainly some of you and our parents, is that there are school districts that are right now at 3 feet, and they are not reporting in-school spread. But it's a chance we take. It's why just last week when the Cook County Department of Public Health had a webinar, they have a webinar for school superintendents and school nurses, school health officials every Friday afternoon right now. As they said, they doubled down on the social distancing, right? Mm-hmm. So they have asked us to please not relent on the social distancing. I don't know if it's just the consideration that variants are out there. There's, again, this is at our core. the most challenging part of all this. But yes, IDPH does have that authority. I do not believe they have shut down any schools in the state of Illinois. They do keep a report of possible outbreaks and possible transmissions, and I've been monitoring that, and it's not extensive. We are, I know last week we reported, I believe, 4 student cases, 3 students and 1 staff, sorry, and I will be reporting 4 this week, at least as of today. The week's not over. I've made that commitment that I'm reporting those weekly now, and they're always going up on our dashboard also. So again, it's I think this is the hardest part, right, is that the pandemic's not over. We wish that it was over. Things have improved. Our metrics have improved. Staff are getting vaccinated. We have the saliva screening as a tool. But again, it's something that certainly weighs heavy on our shoulders if we say to, CDC uses the word required. And that's brand new guidance from the CDC, as we know. IDPH says to the best of your abilities to go 6 feet. So again, to me, and I know I'm saying it, and probably a lot of times tonight, but it is absolutely at the core of the challenging decision that we have in front of us.
It's been about a week since I've looked at the dashboard. 4 sounds high. Have we had 4? It's been a while since we've had 4 in a week, I think, right? I think the last I saw was like 3 a couple weeks ago, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like we actually had a time period where you weren't hearing from me at all about COVID cases. And so, the 4 that I'm going to report this week, I believe, are linked outside of school. Again, our belief is that it's not linked inside of school. Whether or not the Department of Public Health would decide to come in and re-examine that, I think we could probably link it back to some outside sports activities. So again, these are things that our nurses, for those of you that have perhaps experienced any of that, our nurses take this job very, very seriously, and they're pretty nosy. And again, with the best of intentions in keeping our children and our staff safe here in school.
So some of the other challenges that we have, and yes, we are sharing these challenges, we're not using them as excuses, we just want to make sure we're transparent about the things that we are looking at as we look at how to increase instructional time. And yes, they're challenges, but they're not insurmountable. Some of the challenges we're looking at is that our current schedule provides a full day of instruction for teachers, so we need to figure out where do we get that extra time to increase student contact time with teachers. We also have to consider possible teacher or school changes and know first that that is the last resort that any of us want to do. But when we look at those class sizes, we have to look at, do we need to move students out of those larger classes? Do we need to cap a class? So if we have a school that has a grade level that has those high numbers, if there are any remote students in that grade level that would normally go to that school, do we say you can't go to this school for the remainder of the year, you have to go to a different school with lower numbers? You saw that our range is from 14 to 27. So would we have those students go to a different school for the remainder of the year? Teacher and educator shortage is real. And so when we look at how can we provide assistance in some of those larger classes, we're struggling to fill some of our long-term substitute positions that we have. We're struggling to hire for open positions that might come up. It's a real shortage. Even retirees are not ready to come into person and work at this point. We have to look at the physical space and capacity of each school. Our principals have done a great job of looking at how many desks can I truly fit in a classroom? What's the least amount of distance to get everybody? If my teacher combines their AM and PM, what's the least amount of distance to get in? And it's hard, and it's something we continue to talk through, well, what else could we do? Is there another room we could use? Do we look at the multi-purpose rooms? Do we look at the gymnasiums? So we continue to look at the physical space. The scheduling of interventions, enrichments, supports, special area classes, all of those things will have to be adjusted, will have to be changed. If any of your students receive interventions or enrichments or even EL services, you know that they have a certain time that they attend. If we look at extending class time, as we look at extending time, we have to look at scheduling as well. Pacing, grading, groupings. We, especially me as the Director of Teaching and Learning, we try to keep our grade levels in the same area of teaching, realizing that everybody's group of students are different learners and some might have to move slower, some might have to move faster. We try to stay in the same area. We haven't been as successful as I would like as the director of teaching and learning, or as our principals would like as the leaders of the buildings. And so we do have some grade levels that are a unit ahead. So when we look at combining classes, or we look at students who are moving from remote to hybrid, we have to keep in mind that some students might end up in a class where they're either repeating curriculum or they've missed curriculum because that teacher might be ahead of where they're coming from. And then the lunch challenge that everybody knows about and we continue to talk about. So again, while these are listed as challenges, they are not to say they're not doable. It is not to say that we can't address them. It's just to be transparent about all the pieces of this puzzle that we continue to plan for and look at as we look at how to increase learning.
On the physical space one, one thing, Martha, you and I talked about recently was the like remote classrooms or like temporary structures, which seems like it's a really easy thing to do, but it's not quite as easy as it sounds. I don't know if you want to maybe just hit that.
Sure.
quickly.
I know a couple people, parents have reached out with just sharing ideas, and they've asked about renting space in downtown Riverside or getting mobile classrooms. And I will tell you, when we were in the midst of our facility planning, I thought getting a mobile classroom was, like renting a camper and having it pull up to the backside of the school. It is an entirely different process than that. It is something that our Metropolitan Water Reclamation District reviews. Mobile classrooms are essentially put on a foundation. I know I had a colleague share with me, he's like, Martha, you gotta give yourself about a year and a half to even consider getting a mobile classroom. So mobile classrooms just aren't a quick and easy solution. It sounds that way, it's just not. I wish it were. And again, really, I think it's more the size of our classrooms. As you know, our classrooms vary in size. We have absolutely talked about moving classrooms into the library, moving classrooms into the multipurpose room, moving classrooms into the gymnasium. That is something that we may do. That is an active conversation going on right now as we look at those class sizes that are somewhat larger, particularly the 26, 27s. And if we don't have a way to split them, and part of being able to split them is, as Andrew pointed out, truly, we cannot find teachers right now. Teachers either, they're just not out there. The shortage has been something that the state saw coming for a long time, and I think it's really just heightened by the pandemic. And I really hope when this period is over that we are able to continue to recruit really high-quality teachers. We are, just today, we decided that we would reach out to the teacher preparation programs and say, really, do you not have a new grad that wants to come and work here for maybe 6 or 8 weeks? So again, we are really, I just want to share with all of you, I know you know some of this, we are really trying to sort of turn over every stone and look at our possibilities for paraprofessionals and teachers, and again, just significant challenges and all that.
And I think when it comes to lunch, if I'm thinking about this correctly, if we start filling this room with a classroom, then that kind of takes away lunch, which then causes like another issue, right? So.
And I know this is what one of the other districts that we were just talking about, some comparisons, I know that they are simply saying we do not have lunch supervision and your children must go home for lunch. Mm-hmm. I know just the early survey, again, the survey is still open, so families still need to weigh in. We encourage families to weigh in, but a lot of families indicated that they'd be willing to take their children home for lunch. So that's certainly a possibility.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for listening to us this evening. We wanted to talk a little bit about the learning opportunities at Hauser and how this really has been a constant endeavor for the entire school year. Back in November, we really began to explore looking at class sizes, and it really began with our teachers. We had a group of 8th grade teachers who recognized that their classes were getting very small in numbers as families began to pull to full remote. And if you think back to November, we did have rising metrics. At that time, the teachers really were cognizant of what that was doing to students and how that was having students feeling very uncomfortable. We began brainstorming at that point during the adaptive pause to try to figure out how can we combine classes, or how can we combine our blue and gold hybrid learners to create more of a classroom feel. When we came back in January, unfortunately more families began to pull their children out of the hybrid learning model, and when we would talk with the families, what we found was that it really wasn't for COVID reasons, but because the children were not feeling comfortable, they were feeling somewhat awkward in class and really not engaging when there were only 3 or 4 kids in the classroom. At that point, we first looked in this group of, it was a team at the 8th grade, and we looked to move all of our gold students to blue so that they were all coming on the same day. And we made that switch. We needed to notify a few families. And at that point, after doing that, we very quickly realized we have open classrooms on Mondays and Tuesdays. Let's have these kids come in for 4 days a week. I know it was a question of equity, and we really struggled with that, knowing that at that point we could not do that for all students. But it really helped us move along by doing it with this small group of students. We were able to get them in 4 days a week, and the teachers really saw huge improvements just in the engagement in the classroom. I can remember one math teacher saying how great it was that a student turned to another student and said, "What did you get for number 2?" So it was really just something exciting that was happening. At that point, we then started to look at all of our classrooms and to really examine our numbers and look at what could we do to try to do this more on a whole school level. We knew that we needed to get our family declaration of that 3rd trimester attendance in first, because it did come down to a numbers game. So we got the survey data back from our families as to their preference for the 3rd trimester. And after examining those numbers, what we were able to see is that that model would be able to be put in place school-wide with just a few changes to different things. And Mr. Harbalis is now going to share a little bit with you about what those changes were.
So as we looked at our current model, we had 8 tracks of students per grade level, and we started to look at those numbers where we couldn't accommodate the social distancing. So we looked at those individual tracks and saw what rooms they were in, and started to look where can we accommodate those spaces within our building. So our first order of business was to look at what learning spaces we could create. Some of our larger spaces, we converted a side of our library, the orchestra room, and a few of our classrooms that have been used for teacher preparation during the day to be holding students. And with that, it was also still not enough. So again, like Ms. May was saying, we were very fortunate to have the flexibility within a junior high schedule that a student schedule change, they're a little bit more flexible as opposed to just completely changing a teacher. We have changed a few students' schedules so they have the same teacher but at a different period, which effectively put them on a different track. This let us keep that social distancing requirement. And then again with that, it was also still not enough. We were still running into a few problems. So with our solution to that, we started to have develop what we called sister rooms. So those tracks that we couldn't put into a bigger space, still not accommodate them, that we couldn't reorganize, switch their periods, and not change their teachers, we started to have the option of splitting that class up into 2 smaller classrooms, and the teacher teaching from one room and the paraprofessional zooming in for the lesson and leading that class from that room. And we're working with our teachers to make sure that students are not in a room with a paraprofessional all day, that teachers rotate throughout the day. Monday, Tuesday, they would be in a sister room. The paraprofessional for 2nd period would come in, and vice versa throughout the week. So these are some of the continuous improvements that we're making. We're going to continue to work and explore on ways to improve the student experience. We're always looking to bring back some of our co-curricular options in person. Again, we're utilizing our space the best we can. I know I've had some conversations with parents about just, we only have 2 gyms right now and those are our spaces, and as the weather gets nicer, we're really looking to expand and contribute a few more activities as well. And then we're going to continue to listen to student suggestions, because that's kind of where this whole thing started, was hearing from students that were unhappy sitting in a classroom with 2 other students. So that's where this originated, and we're going to listen to their concerns and talk with the kids at school to see if there's anything else that they would like to see happening in their building. And then as well, we're going to keep Wednesdays As our remote Wednesdays, I know that's a big question that we've been getting is why not Wednesdays? I think we've shared the numbers of about 30% of the students are still remote. With this model, that definitely isolates them more than they were in the past. So with Wednesdays being all remote, it gives us a chance to group students together, both hybrid and remote students.
Thanks, Chris, and we'll kind of bring this to a close here. So obviously, we do have this goal. I want to be really clear about that, to improve the student learning opportunities across the board, district-wide, in particular with elementary in mind. Again, we sent out a parent survey on February 23rd. We're going to close that survey this coming Friday. The COVID-19 transition team is ready to go back after this conversation. I have identified, and I know we've already heard that this feels late, bringing something back to the Board of Education April 7th. If there's a way to move that to the prior week, we would certainly look at that. It would require the board to convene a special meeting, but that's certainly an option that we would look at. I will share with you that the other districts, again, right here in our close region, the districts that I talk with most that are looking at some possible return to learn plans, increasing in-person learning time, they are by design not going back until mid-April, like that second or third week in April. And it really relates to spring break. The idea that let's go, if we're going to reduce social distancing, let's wait for 2 weeks after spring break, knowing that we probably have a lot of families that are going to travel or socialize during that time. So again, I know people think that's late. I don't think it's particularly late. I actually think there's some good science in that reasoning and that rationale. So again, certainly hearing that tonight, and we will continue to explore ways to increase the rigor of our asynchronous period of the day. And we are always looking at those additional supports and co-curricular programming. And as I said, we do have teachers at the ready who put in proposals many months ago, but they all relate to doing things in the outdoors and in nicer weather.
And just to tie those two
Sure.
together, maybe like the coming back for a recommendation on April 7th really would be focused on modifying our safety guidelines and whether we want to do that and we're comfortable with it versus the asynchronous part isn't really like a board approval thing, so that could move faster, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's more just changing curriculum
Right.
than, yeah.
Right. And we've been talking about that, and again, wondering about nicer weather. We have wondered, the principals, we've contemplated, would families want to have their child come for music class in the tent outside, or is it really of no great value to come over to the school for a half an hour, 45 minutes, or even an hour? So we know that there are a lot of logistical things for the school, but also for families that are trying to manage this very unusual schedule. So again, we have and we will continue to, and I think it's, I don't mean to say it's easy. I think Angela was saying also that, again, I don't know if I've ever heard it as clearly as I've heard it tonight, that there are concerns about that asynchronous part of the day. I know the principals have all heard it, and those are conversations that can start immediately. So, just in terms of trying to bring this to some closure, we are continuing with this external collaboration. Angela and I both talked about the value in talking to our, job-alike colleagues in our districts, neighboring districts, in terms of the ideas that they have, and certainly continuing our District 96 collaboration with our leadership team, with the COVID transition team, with our nurses. We are going to take a close look at the community feedback that we are getting now and that we'll be bringing to a close and be able to look at all of that in summary. And we will continue to update, and we are looking at that target date, but again, I certainly will commit to all of you that if we can move that up about a week, that we would look at that opportunity. And I do want to say this because this has been a question embedded in a lot of the parent questions too. It is absolutely our goal to fully reopen in the fall of 2021. And I think every school district is saying that. We are all very, very hopeful that the things we have learned will make a huge difference. I do hope that the CDC and the IDPH will modify the social distancing guidelines. I think they won't modify them until the virus sort of stays in a better place, for lack of a better way to put that. But again, it's 6 months from now, which is kind of hard to believe, but absolutely it is our goal, it is our hope, it is our plan to fully reopen in the fall of 21. And the only thing that would change that would be just sort of a grossly intervening virus, right? And we are all just fingers crossed that that is not the direction we are headed in.
And if the new announcement about, Johnson & Johnson and Merck partnering up with theirs and the vaccine, now you got 4 companies,
Yeah.
and I think Biden said, or his administration said, by the end of May, I think every adult will be vaccinated. Like, if that actually happens, then that is probably a very real potential, but that's hard to commit to today because there's still many unknowns. So
right. And, and the stories we've heard from our families and some of our families that have chosen to be all remote, I can't speak for 30% of our families, but some of the stories and the narrative that's been shared, it's not so much a worry about their children getting COVID, it's about a family member that perhaps has a health risk or is compromised in some way, and it's about children potentially bringing the virus back into the home. So this idea of larger scale vaccination, even if it means only for the adults right now, because I know the plans for vaccination of children is just on a different trajectory and a different time schedule. I think that will help the entire community, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the great majority of adults, and that goes for parents, that goes for our staff, that goes for the parents and the seniors that some of our teachers go home and care for, right? I mean, we know that it's been just many, many layers in terms of how we take care of each other during a pandemic. So I just want to be really, really clear about that, about the goal for reopening.
One thing I just wanted to make sure I'm clear in my head, going back to when we created our return to learning plan in August, obviously we're looking through like the different options that schools chose, like the AM PM versus the AB or AM only. The reason we chose the AM PM was to get our kids back in school because we physically didn't have the staffing capacity to do AM only. And then, like the schools that did AM only and then moved to can start building because they don't have a PM class. Like that obviously sounds ideal. Why didn't we do that, right? But the point of that was the PM classes had to happen in order for kids to go to school. So like hindsight is 2020, of course. Like I wish we could have, like now that I know where we're at now, I wish we didn't have that obstacle, clearly. But I just want to be clear that that was a very conscious decision to get our kids back in school. Because if we didn't make that decision, they would be at home. Because, with 30% being remote, we need teachers for remote. So
we have about 700 elementary hybrid students, and that number's been pretty consistent all along. Mm-hmm. Families that wanted to be in person, given our physical capacities and given our staffing. So we, and again, it was truly this very dedicated elementary teacher perspective of wanting to see children every day and really wanted to prioritize the areas of instruction that they felt would be hardest for them to learn at home.
I just want to make sure because, we keep, that was a stressful time then making those decisions. This is, this whole year has been stressful as an administration and board and community, clearly. I just want to make sure that, we're all very clear on the decisions we made and why we made them. And thank you for presenting the challenges. You didn't say they were obstacles, they were challenges, and that's good to hear.
I mean, it's interesting. So you ask yourself, would you go back and do it differently? I mean, certainly I think what we've learned is the hybrid model, the AB, might be easier to modify. But that is Angela, and I saw Kim nodding, the elementary principal's nodding, this idea of you're a first grader and you come to school on Monday, Tuesday, and then you don't come for 3 days. It's like first day of school all over again the next week. I mean, I was part of those conversations, and that was so teacher driven around just knowing little learners.
Yeah, and we are working within the parameters of a teacher's contract as well, which is, a contracted hours with contracted plan time. So, we also have that. I wish we could just say everybody extended a few hours. Morning kids are from 8 to noon and afternoons 1 to 5 or something that would, but clearly that's not an option.
I wonder if I can ask about something that I've heard a lot about in some of the comments that have come in going back to the idea that we're doing saliva testing. Why do we not seem to get something for it? It seems like we're paying a lot of money for it, and yet there seems to be an idea that if we're paying the money for these tests, we're performing them, we should be able to get increased instruction time for it.
So, I think about saliva testing, I think about vaccinations, and I've given it a lot of thought. Actually, I don't know if it was the CDC or one of the public health groups put out, and the principals have heard me talk about the Swiss cheese metaphor. People have seen it. They show the layers and layers of Swiss cheese kind of side by side with each other. If anybody wants to Google it, and we can show it on the screen. I think if you go CDC, Swiss cheese metaphor, it'll come up. But this idea that mask wearing stops the virus spread to some degree, but it's not perfect. Saliva screening has the opportunity to stop the spread of COVID, but it's not perfect. Vaccinations will keep people safer, certainly keep them safe from having serious illness from everything we understand about the vaccine. that social distancing, so that when you put all those pieces together, you get a safe environment, or a pretty safe environment, right? So I do think that if we didn't have saliva screening, we might not have been able to return as quickly as we did in January. I think it gave our staff, staff were very, very concerned, as I think people know, as the board knows, when we returned on January 4th. And as you know, we'd been on pause from that Thanksgiving to the winter holiday time. And there'd been a real increase in COVID metrics in the region. We had kind of our own sort of local spurt or increase in virus that we think sort of followed Halloween, right? I mean, and so there was, much elevated anxiety on part of the staff around just the sense that maybe the environment was not safe. And so saliva screening added a layer for us that was very, very clear. So it allowed us to continue to do what we had been doing, and maybe that wasn't as evident to the community. So I do believe that saliva screening has a value. We've also wondered, like, should we go back to, double screening after spring break, right? So we really do rely on, and I know people have asked a lot of times about the travel guidance, and it's an honor system. You are on your honor to do your best to keep this environment safe for our students and for our staff. And saliva screening does aid in all of that.
I think maybe it was 2 meetings ago. I know it's more than once, but I think most recently at 2 meetings ago, we did talk about the federal grants or the federal assistance that was provided, that we feel we are going to get enough of that it will actually cover at least all of the saliva stuff and maybe even a little bit more. So it is taxpayer money. So it's not, try to ignore that. It is our money. It's just coming from a different avenue, but it's not coming directly from our own pockets, so to speak. It's part of a larger federal package.
It's federal money, right, yeah.
From a selfish perspective, I know we've talked about Hauser, we've talked about elementary. We haven't mentioned much about early learners. With a kid in early learners, I don't know if we have any thoughts on that, on what there might be in that regard.
We haven't forgotten about them. We have had a lot of conversations, and Pam's going to take that one.
We have had a lot of conversations about that. In looking at that, it's difficult at times to keep little ones separated. So that was one of the thoughts. We also told the families at the beginning of the year that we would adjust the tuition and half the tuition. To now suddenly increase it would be a piece as well too. But I think with the early learners, there is a lot of time. They all have their individual materials, a lot of time in sanitizing in between. So I would think in fall we would go back definitely to what it was. But at this time, and looking at the rooms tonight, I took another little peek in there as well. And in order to really have them safely distanced, I think it still is our best interest not to have them here as often, but we have thought about that.
Yeah, I just had a couple of questions, I guess. One is, it seems like there's a very strong desire in everyone's part to increase learning time for kids. I think everyone agrees that's very important. And I think it sounds likely from everything I've heard the administration saying that you're going to come up with a plan to do that. The point I would like to make is that time is time is important in this question, because the cost of making the change, the disruption involved in making the change, that's a fixed cost. That happens even if you decide to make the change on May 31st. You incur that cost of new schedules and all the rest. But the benefit clearly is bigger the earlier we do it, because the benefit sort of is proportional to the amount of increased instructional time that we would get. So in a cost-benefit analysis, the earlier we make this change, and it sounds like there's going to be a change, the better. So I think that just goes without saying. The other thing I would say is that Martha alluded to this, which is that a lot of our decisions and our timing about things is governed by the conventional board's schedule, which is every 2 weeks. And that's fine for most things. There's really nothing really that pressing. But when we're talking about, we only have a couple months left in the school year, 2 or 3 months, if we just kind of, go at our usual slow pace, then that's a significant fraction of that time, especially when you consider the cost-benefit analysis that I just mentioned. So I really think, I personally would be willing to meet, much more quickly and more frequently if we have to. So I don't think that should be an impediment, and that shouldn't set the timescale for your plan to be realized. So those are my 2 general points on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think, a special meeting can be had, and I think
Right.
these are the times to have them. So if it's necessary to move things
Right.
along, then, yeah, I agree.
Particularly for this topic.
Exactly.
And I just want to say, Wesley, to your point about improving asynchronous learning, I think that happens immediately, right? Those are conversations with the teachers that are implementing that part of the day, and how can we make those improvements, and that's part of our ongoing, planning and problem solving. I do need time with the teachers and with the principals, right, around reworking schedules. So we have been, for the past 10 days, probably really contemplating these classes of 27 and 26 and 25. We've kind of set this threshold of about 23 students. Starts to feel like we've mocked up classrooms with 23 children in them, and we have desks kind of halfway out the door, and maybe the teacher pressed up against the wall. So again, we are looking at that. That is a problem we have not yet solved, and we again are just very, very careful about this idea of a teacher change. And I know we even alluded to a possible school change, right? So we talked about, and some of, people listening, I'm sure, are, your children might be in that class, and you say, well, there's only 7 in my child's morning class and 7 in their afternoon. That's one class we have in the district. I know exactly which class that is, and there's 14 in there. Does that mean that other children should go over to Hollywood School to be in that class? I mean, these are the really challenging things that we are trying to figure out. And it's not outside the realm of possibility, but it's a very challenging ask, I think, of a little child and of their parents, right, to be okay with that. And certainly the teacher has said, we love our kids, we know our kids, I don't want to lose any of them. That's what verbatim, what a teacher said to me just the other day, I don't want to lose any of my students. Not this year, not in April. So again, we're working through that. So I appreciate the idea of expediency. I also appreciate what the other districts are saying about the possibility of kind of keeping social distancing intact around that post-spring break time. So again, I think that April, it probably would be wise potentially for the board to meet sooner, so that if there was a plan to be announced and sort of agreed upon, that about another week earlier might be helpful. But I think we do need a couple weeks just to rework schedules and figure out some of these class size issues.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
The survey closes Friday. Right?
That's what I was just going to ask.
Okay. Just so everybody's clear on that, if you haven't filled it out, please do. But then I think on the comment that you just made too, that's great that the teachers don't want to lose the kids, but if it, it might just be something that we have to do. And I think that does come down to parent comfort. And I think it'll be very interesting to see how many parents are comfortable with a teacher change. And then I think one thing I've been thinking about with regards to just the questions that were in there, it is an anonymous survey, and so if you answer yes, 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 or yes, no, no, or yes, no, yes, we don't know who you are and how you answered each of those things. So if you're comfortable coming back but not having a teacher change and you can't pick your kid up from lunch, that's kind of another thing that probably needs to be figured out, right? Who is that scheduling about, and that might take a little bit.
So it's a very good point. Let me just reiterate this. This came up, I think, in the summer when we were doing this too, that the survey is designed to get sort of broad opinions right now.
Yeah.
Would people be willing to have a teacher change? Would people be willing to be in a non-socially distanced at 6-foot classroom? It doesn't mean that anybody is elected for that or voted for that or chosen that. What would come would be then a sort of a, I know our neighboring district calls it a commitment survey, right? Now I'm asking you, would you do you plan to come back if the classroom is less than 6 foot socially distanced? Would you be okay with a teacher change? Or it might be, given this class, we know your child will have a teacher change. Are you willing to come back knowing that their teacher has to change? So again, we have to figure out the exact wording on that, but nobody has voted for, agreed, or committed to anything. They're really just sharing their opinions and impressions, which are very important to us as we consider and contemplate these changes.
So the thing about the survey that I was going to ask is that if it's closing this coming Friday. Is it this Friday? Like
Yeah.
in 2 days, Friday? Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, will we hear results from that before the April 7th meeting? Because that seems like kind of a long,
Yeah, I mean, so we have, by schedule, and Jeff, your point's very well taken, by schedule, we have a March 17th
17th.
Board of Education meeting. So we can certainly pull together the survey information, and again, those are those broad strokes and impressions and opinions that help us understand the direction and the desires of the
yeah, because they
community.
could really guide the plan. Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure that people didn't think we were waiting for April 7th to hear those results a month later.
And I think one of the questions was, and I took it, I think, the second day after it came out, so I'm just going off memory here. One of them was about if you're currently in hybrid, would you be interested in coming back? So it'll be interesting to see how many people are in, kind of like our trimester, how many people wanted to swap, and we almost had it wasn't quite even, but it was pretty balanced, so it didn't really cause any big issues. But if we do have, just for whatever reason, a large portion of hybrid folks want to come back in, and we've already got 27 kids in a class, and you're going to go potentially into that class, which would probably be easier. You can go into whatever class because it's going to likely require a teacher change. On the other side of that, how many people that are not comfortable with some of these social distancing things, because at 27, I got to imagine we're clearly under 3 feet at that point, which doesn't feel great. How many people are going to switch back to hybrid, and are we going to end up ultimately having more kids than you're currently modeling? And so there's just a lot of considerations that need to go into this. So
Yeah, and we've been thinking about it exactly, because the principals all looked up at me like, yeah. Absolutely, this is the very nature of the conversation. I mean, one idea is with those larger classes that this becomes the classroom, right? The library becomes the classroom.
yeah, okay.
But I think we're looking at 3 feet. I mean, I have great hesitation going below 3 feet. I have hesitation going below 6. So, that is exactly what we are trying to sort out right now. But the less than 3 feet, no one has really said that's okay. I mean, I know we all kind of sort of take this moment and say, well, the American Academy of Pediatrics said back in the summer that 3 feet was okay. And that's not the advising group that sort of, had the authority or was granted the authority to be that source, but certainly a reliable source that a lot of people have said, I think that makes sense. And so, again, I'm not familiar with school districts that are going less than 3.
That would be, for me personally, that would be I don't think I can make that call going less than 3.
So we probably do anticipate that if we move to more in-person learning, there could be, some families who decide to go full remote because they're not comfortable. So we also have to be aware of those remote classes, and that we're not going to go throw 30 kids in a remote class, So we all of this has to be guided by all class sizes, whether you are in-person or remote, need to be, adequate. Class size is something in our district that we have, for 6 years that I've been on the board, it's been a very high priority that we pride ourselves on our small class sizes. So I certainly, understand the difficulties with that.
And let me just reiterate that that's clear. I mean, we said it in the presentation that the remote academy mirrors the hybrid program. So if the hybrid program goes full day, the remote academy is going full day, and the AM plus PM additions would put us up at that class size upper limits of maybe 27 kids. So it's 27 kids on a Zoom screen. They don't have to worry about social distancing, but
Right.
It does change potentially. So, and again, and I know David's got kids in the remote academy, right? I mean, we continue to hear just, high degrees of satisfaction with the remote academy. And again, families that have made that decision for very clear and careful reasons. And so again, we also have trepidation around, shifting that model too.
Just a quick aside on 6 feet or 3 feet. It's those are guidelines. Those aren't there's nothing like magical about 6 feet versus 5 feet. It's what people who study this, epidemiologists who study this, say universally. I think is that what's far more important than some nominal distance like 6 feet is ventilation. If we all sat in a room 6 feet apart and we didn't have good ventilation in the room, it wouldn't matter that we were sitting 6 feet apart. Conversely, if we're sitting outside and we have really good air circulation, then it wouldn't matter if we're sitting 3 feet apart. Its ventilation is way more important. So, that's the thing I think when you make this decision, you have to have really good thought to, is keeping the windows open, keeping the doors open, and just getting good fresh air in there for the kids.
I think, I feel like this maybe came up on a phone conversation you and I had, but an in addition to the 2 weeks after spring break, April's also going to hypothetically be warmer. It might be wetter, but it'll at least be warmer, and so you can open the windows or get outside too. So.
And if you recall, we purchased lovely tents for each of the schools, and we kind of use them as the place you would sit waiting for your temperatures. But we really would love in the spring to be able to use them for more classroom, and it doesn't even have to be under the tent. I think teachers are really eager to take learning outside more and more in the spring. The weather, as we know, the winter has been challenging for that.
So I'm a little nervous to ask this question, but I know it's a question I've heard from the community. How do teachers feel about this? Like, we're hearing from you, we're hearing from board members, community members, we have administrators here. How are our teachers feeling about this? Because they're a large part of this puzzle.
Absolutely.
And I know we can't speak on their behalf.
Right, I don't want to speak for them, and I know they are also surveying their own group, and I do anticipate that they will come and share with the board as they have along the way. And I think they're not comfortable. They're not comfortable with it, and they have become really comfortable with this plan. And I will tell you from a teacher perspective, the other thing about the AM/PM split, this was a plan that they designed, that they loved, that they really prioritize those core instructions. They have prioritized those key relationships with their students. I think they would also tell you that opportunity to have 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 kids in a class, even though it's only for a short period of time, has allowed them to intensify instruction, intensify their support and attention to individual children and to all the children in the group, that they feel that it's really good instruction. And I certainly hear that there's a concern about the asynchronous part of the day, and as I said, we'll commit to taking a closer and closer look at that. But no, I think for teachers, yes, most are getting vaccinated, and I think that allows them to feel a lot safer doing the job that they've been doing since they came in here on September 2nd. My own reflection is I think about healthcare workers that got vaccinated, and it didn't necessarily change their job. Maybe for some it did, but what we were hearing was it allowed them to do their job in a way that they didn't feel they were walking in and potentially putting their lives on the line, perhaps to be overly dramatic. But there were teachers that absolutely felt, like, I am putting myself at high risk for contracting COVID by coming in here. And so there was a discomfort around COVID. I think that's improving. I think the discomfort comes from the big shift and change now and it's not because they're just comfortable and they don't want to change, it's that truly they value those relationships and those instructional opportunities they have with the kids. So I know you'll hear from them. I don't want to speak for them too much, but I can tell you, I don't think the teachers are saying, let's do this. They're saying we love kids and we can't wait for when we can do it when it is deemed to be safer to do so.
I was just going to clarify, go back to my initial comments, it's a safety thing, not I don't want to be in school with the kids, it's purely the safety thing. So
they're frustrated with the schedule. I don't know if it was during strategic planning, there was a video of, children running around and eating lunch together and hugging on each other as kids do, and I think several teachers were like, oh, I can't wait for those days, right? So, yeah.
Further questions?
I feel like, thank you for the presentation. I do feel like all the emails we've been getting, the public comment, I'm so grateful though that I think we are so lucky to live in a community where we have engaged parents, and I think that's fantastic. And I feel like we tried to go through the emails and make sure that everything that was asked or questioned was addressed in this presentation. So if we missed something, I guess email us.
Sure. I was going to kind of say the same thing. This didn't really answer. It gave information, but it didn't really create commitments or definite plans, which was not the intent. Because we're not there yet. But hopefully, it at least gave everybody more common ground to be on as we're talking in the community and with each other, and what we want, what we need, things like that. But yeah, I think this felt very helpful to kind of center everybody so that we can kind of move on to the next step. And at the next board meeting, we'll get some feedback, and then hopefully at the next one, we'll have some more targeted action plans. And in the meantime, hopefully we can start making some incremental improvements on the asynchronous stuff and all that. So I'm sure we will get plenty of feedback based on what was said tonight, and we will read that once again. I don't know about you all. I've read every single one of those top to bottom, every reply, every single word of that I've read, and And I personally thrive in feedback. It helps you make better decisions, understanding where other people are. So keep it coming, and we will continue to work on it.
Yeah, and I mean, just, I think maybe I said this earlier. I mean, I remember in August, at that August 6th meeting, the weight we all felt at that meeting.
Yeah.
This kind of feels like we're back at that spot with this
Yeah.
weight, and I don't think any person in this room is taking that lightly in any way. And I'm sure if you've surveyed the room, not all of us board members agree on this. I feel one way, and what's best for my family is one thing, which might not be best for even everybody in this room. So this is a situation where everybody's making decisions for very rational and careful, and what's best for their family. There are no situations where like, oh, well, that person's just being irrational, or like these are all very, people are really thinking about this. And they're not all on the same page. So for us to make a decision, there's just a lot of weight to it. And I want people to know that we are clearly taking that very seriously, and, that we're hearing everybody, and yeah.
I mean, yeah, as an educator, I mean, certainly our code of ethics says you put children first, and you put children's safety number one, and you put their learning number two. Or maybe it's a tie, but really safety. I mean, we talk about that's why we do our fire drills and everything else. Never did we think that it would be, safety educating children during a pandemic. I mean, I think a year and a half ago, this was, I think it's fair to say it really wasn't in any of our minds. A year ago, of course it was, because it was really all just starting.
I will say, I will never forget one of the meetings in February, or maybe even late January. We were sitting at a board meeting at Blythe, and Jeff happened to be next to me, and he said, oh, this is going to be serious. And I was kind of like, oh, we'll handle this. And when Jeff said to me, no, this is going to be very serious, I had a moment of oh. And, unfortunately, Jeff was correct on that. But that was the moment that all of this became very real to me. And so, the weight of this is very heavy, and none of this is taken lightly.
But I mean, but what you said, Martha, I mean, this is very serious, and we're all taking this very deliberately, but the thing is, we're not going to please. I mean, just sort of looking, because I read the emails as well, just sort of looking at, we're going to probably only satisfy half the community. So, I mean, the community seems very split on what is best and what directions we should go. So, I mean, I guess the thing is, and I think you guys did a great presentation. People, I mean, we are taking this very seriously. There's a lot of thought going into this. And we're looking to do what's best for the kids. And I think that's the important thing. And I appreciate you also sort of level setting this, because I knew there's a lot of misinformation going on. Specifically, I've heard people saying we haven't been thinking about fall. But I mean, we have been thinking about fall for a long time, not just tonight. So,
Yes.
So I appreciate sort of that level setting.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Ramesh is pacing the halls, so.
Yeah, we've had, I think, our architect waiting on Zoom for a while.
Yes. Shall we move on to the Facilities Committee?
And I will suggest that the principals who will be greeting children early tomorrow morning, if you all need to head out, absolutely feel free to do so. You're welcome to stay for the facilities conversation, but don't feel like you have to.
Thank you for coming and staying, though.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for coming. Thank you for presenting. All right. So next on the agenda is the Facilities Committee. I will hand it to Joel.
Well, to start with, we have a couple of we've got a couple memorandums of understanding to address the central Hauser sprinklers and then the Hollywood playground. And we have Ryan from the architects firm here to discuss some things, and then Ramesh is also here probably to give us a better summary than I just did.
There's Ryan. Have you been sitting there all 2 hours?
I think he
And
has.
Steve.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, Ramesh, come on down.
I did listen to that very patiently. I feel for the parents too. So as Joel mentioned, we're going to discuss two memos, MOUs, which we've actually presented to you previously 2 months ago, at which time the board had decided to make a split on the award of professional services to DLA. So the initial MOU had all the services, including schematic design, design development, construction documents, and the bid section in the MOU. And in December, we decided that because of budgetary constraints, that we wanted to see where the budgets were going to land based on the play lot design and where the sprinklers were going. At that time, the board decided to go ahead with just the schematic design and the design development phases of the project. If you recall, a few weeks ago at the last board meeting, I presented the budgets for both the sprinkler project and the play lot project. And the play lot project had come down significantly from original $600,000, which the board felt was excessive. We trimmed the project down to $380,000. So the MOU right now is, all it's seeking is to bring that old MOU back, which we had presented in December, and grant the architect the fees to complete the documents and go out to bid. The timeline for this is essentially very tight in the sense that we have to go out to bid by the end of this month. The budget number and the bids come back in. The board has every process and every right to stop the project at that time and not award it. So this only takes us through the bidding phase of both the sprinkler project and the play lot project. It's just the design services associated with that. And out here right now today, we're only seeking, just presenting the MOU to you. The actual decision can wait till the next board meeting in the middle of March. Any questions on the services?
Ramesh, just to note that the central sprinkler MOU actually does take us through construction, but that's because that project is a have to do.
That's correct.
Because of life safety issues and to make sure that when we hopefully return back in the fall, that our buildings are ready to go to receive our children.
Right, and that's really on a super tight schedule simply because if we award the project by mid-April after we get the bids, hopefully it's a reasonable number and falls within the numbers that we projected it at. The procurement of the fire pumps is a 16 to 18 week lead time item. So it'll arrive probably almost towards the end of July. And we're really cutting a fine schedule to get that in. So that project will go, as you mentioned. I mean, we have to get it done by the fall semester. The play lot, on the other hand, when we bid it out, we're going to have multiple bids and multiple numbers that the board will have decisions on. You could do the multi-purpose room, you can do the play lot, or you can do both. Or we can see all the numbers or do nothing. That's an option too.
I'm noting that we seem to have projected budgetary numbers for the Hollywood projects. We don't have anything yet for the central sprinkler, and I know that it's hard to know, but.
Dan, it's actually in here, it's Ramesh.
Yeah,
It's the
I put the numbers
1.2
together.
million.
Yep.
I did not see that. Where was that?
Page 2 of the February 25th Memorandum of Understanding,
Okay.
bottom of the page.
Page 2.
I have that in front of me here.
Yeah, so we had projected a budget at that time, and the engineers did go back to the site. It needs to get tweaked again, but we had some allowances to capture the changes that they have made.
And
So we
there's,
still believe it's in that range.
and there's a couple things to note in that memorandum. One is that it, obviously the potential asbestos or whatever else is found when demolition activities start have the possibility of changing costs. But then also that you have made an effort along with the architect to avoid undue increases in cost by allowing some of the infrastructure to not be
That's correct.
reburied in the building, i.e. put into walls and such, that it would be exposed, and this is a cost savings to avoid extra demolition.
That's correct. As well as the other change we made was they're going to create allowances in the bid form so that every contractor bids it, so that we don't have a contractor who thinks that there's no demolition and others who think that there's excessive demolition. So we try and keep everyone on the same plane by including an amount for ceiling replacement, wall repairs. We'll keep allowances that they'll draw down on, so that'll be part of the base bid. And they'll give us unit prices for any excessive work. And if they don't use any of those allowances, they find a more novel way of doing the work, we would get the money back. Because that's what we would allow in the bid form, saying it's a use it or you return it to us.
Any other questions? Is there something you wanted to bring up, or?
And we're voting on these at the next meeting.
Yep, the
Yes,
plan is
there's
to
no
vote
vote
on
on
March
this tonight.
17th, right? And if there are particular thoughts or concerns, worries about them, let's definitely speak about them now. I know this has been sort of in planning and preparations. Ramesh said, well, these are sort of a split out version of the MOU that you looked at more comprehensively back a while ago, so.
Yeah, in terms of that, I don't have any particular question. Obviously, the central sprinkler system has to be done. We're all in agreement on the Hollywood playground. I think there's also some questions about the other project in Hollywood, the small Riverside. What price that comes back at. It makes sense to bid it out and see what we get. But to me, it's like we need to see
What's going to cost and all the rest, so.
Right. There'll be all the options available at that time, 1, 2, 3, or none.
And I know, Ramesh, just to speak to the idea of, I know there are people that are sort of watching, wondering about the spring approval process of bids. It's still,
So-
on track. It could be a summer of '21 project, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
We really, this is a very tight frame right now. We've been pushing this project for quite some time, and this is the critical path, is the way we would describe it, that we have to get this awarded in April, or not award them, one of the two. So.
I feel like we should make up comments to talk about
Well, I
it.
suppose the only other comment is to Steve and Ryan, and not necessarily put you on the spot, but this will. You have the capacity to do the work, and you believe that this schedule is realistic in terms of producing your drawings and being ready for bids, yes?
Sorry, I think that was directed to us, but it's really hard to hear.
I apologize. So, this will put you on the spot slightly. So your firm does have the capacity to, you have the resources, the people to get your work done in time to make this schedule work?
Yeah, we do. We're on track with the engineers and the drawings to go out to bid at the end of March, which should get us bids back in April and mobilize in May. So that would, we are on track.
Thank you.
Actually, Joel, we have not told them to stop. We've asked them to proceed with the documents because there's just no way we can stop for 2 weeks or 3 weeks and wait. So right now they're proceeding with construction documents, as I say, on good faith. So
That was my understanding,
Yes.
but if we were looking for a question, that was it.
So I seem to recall that there was talk of possibly combining this with other projects previously, but I'm guessing that if we're pushing for this summer, where there's not a way we can combine these projects, in a way to achieve economies of scale that were discussed previously.
actually, the Central Sprinkler project is a standalone project because it's a about 75% of it is fire protection. We don't have any other fire protection projects elsewhere. So it doesn't make any sense to combine that with a third project.
I
a
guess I'm
second
speaking more to the Hollywood project.
The Hollywood project, again, by itself, if we award all three parts, which is, the site and the multi-purpose room, sorry, 2 parts, it is a significant project. The only advantage would have been if we had done the Blythe Park field work as well. But at this time, it makes sense for Hollywood to be treated as a standalone, because I think we would have confused a lot of bidders if we said 1, 2, 3, maybe 2 combinations, 3 combinations. You may not get very good bids. You lose the economies of scale if you only award one of the 3 parts. They may bid one part really high, which they know that you're going to award. So we've got to be very careful when we package these things. But there are other ideas that we've been discussing, which we intend to discuss with the Facilities Committee coming up this week, next week, on other potential projects and how we can combine them. Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah.
Sorry for the wait.
Yeah, it was a long wait for a few minutes. I guess 15. We did about 15 minutes. All right, so we'll move on to the agenda. Next is Policy Committee.
Don't have anything tonight.
All right, and then Personnel Committee.
I yielded my time to Education Committee tonight.
Okay. And then finally, Finance Committee.
Nothing to report at this time.
All right, if there is nothing else, then future meeting dates will be March 17th, 2021, the regular business meeting, 7 p.m. in the multipurpose room at Ames. The board will enter into closed session at 6:30 p.m. if necessary, and return to open session at 7 p.m. April 7th, 2021, Committee of the Whole meeting, 7 p.m. at Ames School in the multipurpose room. And if there is nothing, there's no second public comment. So if there is nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.